To our webinar. We will begin promptly. Make sure your speakers are turned on. You will be muted during this webinar. Please use our chat to ask questions to our presenter. As a friendly reminder, this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. You can download the PDF of today's presentation. Once again, welcome. We're glad you could join us. Welcome to our webinar. We will begin promptly. Make sure your speakers are turned on. You will be muted during this webinar. Please use our chat to ask questions to our presenter. As a friendly reminder, this webinar will be available on our YouTube channel. You can download the PDF of today's presentation. Once again, welcome. We're glad you could join us. National Hispanic and Latino Mental Health Technology Transfer Center was established to develop and maintain a collaborative network to support research development and dissemination, training and technical assistance, and workforce development for Hispanic Latino populations and communities receiving mental health services throughout the U.S. mainland and the Caribbean. We offer free technical assistance. If you want more information, please contact us. The National Hispanic and Latino MHTTC is under the direction of the Institute for Research, Education, and Services in Addiction, IRESA, and housed at the Universidad Central del Caribe School of Medicine in Puerto Rico and supported by the Substance Abuse and Mental Health Services Administration, SAMHSA, of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. As mentioned, the Mental Health PTC network is funded by SAMHSA. SAMHSA strives to reduce the impact of substance use and mental health disorders on U.S. communities throughout its programs and services and demonstrates that behavioral health is essential to health. Prevention works, treatment is effective, and people recover from mental and substance use disorders. You can learn more about SAMHSA by visiting www.samhsa.gov. And now our moderator.
Welcome everyone. This webinar is part of activities for Hispanic Heritage Month. For us here at the National Hispanic and Latino MHTTC, the Hispanic Heritage Month means demonstration of how society values the contribution of Hispanic and Latino communities living in the U.S. This month celebrates, recognizes, and highlights the traditions, culture, and diversity of Hispanic and Latinos. Our presenter today will be Sarah Howell. Sarah is the school social worker at Las Americas Newcomer School in Houston Independent School District. Sarah has built her career working with immigrants and refugees and specializes in trauma and torture survivors within those populations. Additionally, Sarah is passionate about educating others about trauma and trauma-informed education. Sarah is advocate for the immigrant and refugee community as well as mental health services for youth. She has written 2 chapters about refugee trauma and school-based interventions for immigrant and refugee youth that will be published in spring 2019. She has traveled extensively to understand the clients she works with, including trips to Kakuma refugee camp in Kenya and Central America to trace the journey that unaccompanied minors are making up to the north. And we're going to begin with our pre and post questions for our audience. So we'll go for the first question. Do you currently serve Hispanic and Latino youths with any serious emotional disturbance? We have about 74% yes, 25% no. Next question. Are you planning to serve youth Hispanic and Latino populations from school in the next 6 months? We got about 80% yes, 20% no. What is your current professional role? We have around 40% counselor, therapist, psychologist, 20% social worker. What type of setting do you currently work in? We got mostly school-based, 20% university higher education. All therapeutic interventions in school need to take place in a traditional office setting and be led by licensed therapists. %80 false and 20% true. Crisis needs across the student population can be served equally with the same intervention? Crisis needs. %98 false. School-based therapeutic interventions only benefit students with severe mental health needs. Around 100% false. Very good. So we're basically done with our pre and post questions. And now in a couple of seconds or minutes, we're gonna have Sarah Howell with us, and she's gonna begin her amazing presentation. Hello, Sarah, can you hear us?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you good. Welcome, Sarah.
Thank you. And can you see everything just right? Move this over.
We're working on that. Pretty in a couple of seconds we'll be able to upload.
You should share your screen, Sarah.
Okay. Perfect.
That's the only thing
Okay.
that we can see.
There we
you
go.
Good
Excellent.
now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you guys so much for having me. Am I good to go?
Absolutely, Sarah. Welcome.
Thank you. So I want to share a little bit about the school that I'm coming from to give everybody context for the interventions that we're going to talk about. After that, I want to say very, very briefly about forced migrants and our community trauma, the stress and needs, and then I'm going to break down the 3 special strategies interventions that we're doing on our campus. Our campus is a very special, we're a newcomer campus. I'm located in Houston, Texas. We are part of the Houston Independent School District. We are 100% newcomer. So typically our school, we enroll throughout the year. We really reflect what's going on worldwide. So we usually start with about 60 students, and then depending how many refugees are resettled, how many kiddos are crossing the border, our enrollment increases. This year, however, we started the school year with 360, and we continue. We're officially closed, but we got 1 new kiddo yesterday. So it's a little bit different year for us. We really reflect the political environment and what migration flows look like worldwide. We're grades 4 through 8, but we don't look super traditional. Our 4th and 5th graders are together in elementary, and our 6th, 7th, and 8th graders are organized by language level. So everybody in our school is coming in with no English, and our specialty is actually SIFE, so significantly interrupted formal education. We take the newest of the newcomers with high needs. This often, because of trauma, because of forced migration, we work a lot on socializing kids. And so how we meet, the types of interventions that we're going to talk about were designed because of this unique population. Our school's been around for quite a long time, since 1997, but it's kind of taken different shapes depending on what the community needs are. And what I always like to start out telling people, we talk about forced migrants. When I came into the work, when I was hired at the school, my background, I had not intended to work with kids. I had done a lot of work with adults in the past, and I had really wanted to focus on East Africa. I worked specifically with resettled refugees, and I came into the school in 2014 during the height, the first surge back then we talk about, Central American kids from the Northern Triangle. And I looked around and it was all of these Latino youth, and I didn't know what was going on. And I came in really narrow-minded and learned a lot. I really humbled me, put me in my place. And I didn't speak a word of Spanish at that point. And starting in 2014, I started traveling down to Central America. So I've made 9 trips. I just went back to Guatemala about 2 weeks ago to really understand a little bit better what's going on. But that's why the term forced migrants on our campus is so, so important. Because traditionally when we talk about a refugee school, we think of individuals who are resettled. And on our campus, we're looking at kids who are in the moment seeking safety. And that's why the interventions have kind of evolved. The majority of our population right now is Honduran, Salvadorian, and Guatemalan. These are kids that are in immigration proceedings and making their case. And so the trauma that you can imagine when you have to present yourself in front of an immigration judge and explain why you need to be able to stay here and you're 9, 10, 11, the hard stuff keeps coming. We do, however, we have some resettled refugees this year, probably about 10%, again, kind of reflecting travel bans, executive orders. At any given time, we have about 30 languages on our campus. And so that's another reason when we talk about interventions, why we've had to branch out and look at how to serve these kids in crisis with non-traditional means. Excuse me. I assume most people have some background in trauma, and so I didn't want to focus too long on talking about defining trauma, but again, putting our kids in context and where these interventions were born from. We're looking at a population that has, on my campus, been forced to leave. This is not, I understand this is not every ESL student, this is not every Latino student, this is not every immigrant student, but our kiddos, because we're focusing on significantly interrupted formal education, kids who've not been in school before, these are kids who haven't been able to attend regularly for some reason, and typically it's because of community violence and war and conflict. So we're seeing kids who have had to flee their home, start a new life as a last resort. They're not coming because they wanted to just make more money. It's because it was their only chance to survive. There is a really insane level of complex trauma, layer after layer, and it's an exceptionally vulnerable and young population. A lot of our kids have come unaccompanied. They're still dealing with family separation, and so the attachment has been it's really wonky, to say the least. And the trauma continues here in the United States as they face an uncertain future. Sometimes I talk about all of the layers on top of it of I think all of us are familiar with natural disasters and the impact those play. Last week when we had hoped to do this was right when Imelda hit, and trying to deal with flooding on our campus and keeping our kids calm while water was rising was just one more added stress. And so life goes on. Immigrants don't exist in a vacuum, but how that experience feels, manifests, looks through the eyes of an immigrant is something we try to peel back on our campus. So in our community, we're located in Gulfton in Southwest Houston. It's a community neighborhood that has pretty high rates of poverty, lacks a lot of resources, and our Latino population lacks access to a lot of resources, especially because of their immigration status and where they're at in their process of seeking legal status. We do a lot of mental health interventions on our campus, but we are trying to create strategies and interventions that we can find therapeutic value in everyday interactions. I know a lot of our kids, for instance, live in neighborhoods with a really high rate of violence and insecurity, and so the dangerous stuff is happening down the street as well. We see a pervasive experience of pattern of broken, failed relationships, and the grown-ups, the safe people that were unable to protect them from harm. Here, when our kids are arriving, they have unfamiliar family dynamics, and so really trying to tease out who's safe, how you build a relationship is a challenge for them. They have an uncertain legal future, and I really want to be clear that we're looking at mixed status families, and so a lot of our kids, our student may have just arrived, a parent might have temporary protective status, someone else might be under DACA, and might have parents who have no option for legal relief whatsoever, as well as siblings who are born here. And so the tension of how immigration plays a part in the entire family and the safety they feel is an everyday concern. Safety is our number one priority. And I've created this, I really love trying to explain mental health concepts and needs to non-mental health practitioners. And so this is something I made for our teachers a couple of years ago to explain that in HISD, there's been this big move to have wraparound services to educate, to support the whole child. Teachers are teaching in the classroom, and we have other staff members who are trying to reach these other needs. But I think that we often oversimplify that when you look at like Maslow's hierarchy, you hit the physiological needs and then you can hit the safety needs, and then you can, and it's just as you step by step you move up. And I think it's way oversimplified in that sense, because we have to do physiological and safety needs concurrently at the same time. Finding shelter when that's unsafe is not a useful intervention, is not a useful support. And to think that, you know, each of these aspects gets an equal percentage of time with newcomer kids right now with unaccompanied minors, that is not the case. I'd say about 80% of my time is taken up meeting these basic needs. And then when you get to move on to love and belonging, esteem, self-actualization, they have to be infused with safety. So I'm trying to rush through the first parts, and there's some things I'm going to kind of skip over so that we can get to the, I think the exciting stuff. But you guys should have the PowerPoint slides so you can follow up. At our school, we place a very high priority on social emotional learning and on mental health. So we integrate everything we do gets to have kind of this mental health influence. We, over the last 5-6 years since I've been there, we've really pushed on becoming a trauma-informed school. So much so that after my first year, I was allowed to create a social emotional curriculum that has taken the place of kind of what a homeroom, an advocacy period would be. And so every single day, well, it'll come up a little bit more later, but we have a social emotional learning class, and it's as well as integrating non-traditional interventions. So the idea of a trauma-informed school on our campus, and this can be a whole nother conversation in and of itself, but just the teaser is that I get frustrated when people talk about being trauma-informed by just knowing what trauma is. That's definitely the first component, but the idea in my mind of a trauma-informed school is looking at the school through a trauma lens, where academics, teaching methods, structure of the school, expectations, and social relationships are all viewed through the eyes, the experience of someone who's experienced trauma. When I do presentations where you can see me, I often hold up lenses where you look through, or tinted glasses, tinted purple glasses, and talk about how when you've experienced trauma, your worldview is tainted, it's tinted. So you can still see the person on the other side, but trying to look through the lens of, in this case, something purple, everything's skewed. And so building a support system when individuals, youth in this case, are looking at the world a little skewed, it just adds a layer of complexity. So on our campus, our social emotional learning curriculum, it's a unique curriculum that provides trauma-informed social emotional character education and cultural orientation that's culturally responsive and fluid based on current needs. So this is a lot of work. It's right now the 608, my office, some of my social work interns help me every week prepare these materials, but these are lessons that you would typically offer in individual work, in small group setting, in a counseling office, that I've scaled up to give to the entire school. They are a lot of the topics are inspired by cultural orientation concepts that are taught in a refugee camp before refugees leave, or relevant to educate on some of the norms here that are different than life in Guatemala looks like. These are themes that I've tried to kind of connect with what our shelters, what kind of lessons they teach about everything from honesty to hygiene, to teaching about Halloween. So educating on US norms and cultures, but understanding that, like, it's just an education. You don't need to celebrate Halloween, but this is what happens when kids are running around in costumes on October 31st. This is a non-negotiable class, daily class on our campus. Curriculum's handed to teachers. The entire school gets it. And so it's material that everybody from a 4th grader through an 8th grader can pull something out of. Lessons and materials are provided to teachers. They don't have to do anything themselves aside from read the materials and facilitate the conversations. And then these other interventions are integrated. My favorite part of our cell class is when we get to talk about identifying feelings, and so there's themes that are pulled from traditional CBT and other therapeutic interventions. But I learned real quick that our kids, especially, well, all of my immigrant kids, are not accustomed to talking about feelings. And it's standard across the Latino community that the first step is educating on how it's okay to feel, it's okay to express emotions, it's okay to be sad. So we start out in my favorite lesson that you see the kiddo doing here with drawing each different facial expression and looking at practicing it, because some of my favorite kids to work with are the tough kind of at-risk gang youth, and seeing how they say, I'm really happy right now, and they have a grimace. After that, I started bringing in mirrors so we can say, well, you say you look happy. Does this look like a happy face? Now draw what happy looks like. And so on this particular worksheet, they use the mirror to look at their expression, draw their expression, write in English, and then translate it to their language. And they keep it in an agenda that they carry with them at all times. So this is the starting place for this week's worth of lesson when we talk about emotions, and then we build on it from there. So this all goes to say that everybody across our entire school is getting these basic social emotional lessons. And then a couple years ago, as arrivals skyrocketed, I started struggling so I'm a LCSW, so I do therapy myself. I started realizing that all of the training, all the interventions I learned in school were really swell, but not adequate. So I've taken TF-CBT training, I've taken CBT. I'm not trained in, but familiar with DBT. I do EMDR, and on and on. What I started to realize was our kids are in crisis. They're right on the cusp of, they could go either direction. They can really recover and do great with some support, with some strength, building in that resilience, or they can spiral into utter crisis. And so in a school, we have this amazing opportunity to help build that up and strengthen them. But I also realized that if I was back in Kakuma working a refugee camp, it would be utterly absurd to think of offering TF-CBT to Burundians crossing the border or Sudanese fleeing. All you focus on is stabilization. So how do you do stabilization for an entire school in a school during school hours? And so that's where we started with, what do you do when nothing you've learned is working, nothing you've learned is quite adequate, and when traditional interventions aren't cutting it. So that's where the garden, the rabbits, and then just a few words on restorative practices for newcomers came from. So we have the first thing I wanted to focus on is our trauma-sensitive sensory butterfly garden. It has 3 components, so trauma-sensitive, sensory, and butterflies. The idea is to create a culturally familiar, calming space that students can do meaningful work in. The work is really important for my Latino boys in particular, who have come from Honduras, have come from San Pedro Sula, have come from Usulutan, and have never been in school or not been in school for 10 years and don't think that that's where they need to be focused right now. And so giving them a chance to work on figuring out how to install some irrigation, digging, growing, cultivating corn, it makes school feel meaningful, that they're getting something out of it. This also has a background in horticulture therapy. So there's real therapeutic value, research written about therapy here. But what I want to be clear is that you don't have to be a therapist to do. You can use these interventions from a academic side as well. So the trauma-sensitive component has multiple aspects. But first of all, if you've experienced trauma, the opportunity to...
I'm sorry to interrupt you. Something happened with the audio like maybe a minute ago or so. I don't know if you could just repeat what you were saying in the previous slide, just so that everybody can hear, because apparently it was something with the internet.
Got it.
Thank you.
Is this a good one? Okay. I'm gonna head back here. Okay. So I was just saying that the first thing I wanted to talk about with looking at some strategies, interventions, is the garden. And the basic idea of the garden is creating a culturally familiar, calming space that students can do meaningful work in. The work is so important because a lot of especially my older boys, my 13, 14, 15-year-olds who have not been in school and whose value is working hard and earning money, this gives them a chance that I can, excuse my language, but bribe them to come to school, sit in math class where you learn to count money, and then come and work with Miss Sarah in the garden where you can grow something, where you can hone your skills, where we can work on, setting up irrigation. So there's the chance to do something that feels meaningful, something that feels like it's building some job skills, as well as the other aspects of, calming and culture. I wanted just to give the background that there is a true mental health research value in this, that horticultural therapy is a real therapy form. The trauma sensitive side is multifaceted. The one side, as I travel, I try to take pictures. I try to look at what's growing different places. So this has led to a wealth of conversations. We try to do flowers, scents, plants that are familiar and comforting. When I was doing EMDR with a kid from Syria a couple years ago, we had to talk about calming imagery. What does it look like? What does it smell like? And he kept referring to the jasmine. And so I bought some jasmine when we planted jasmine in the garden. These are a handful of my kids from Mexico and Guatemala. I think these are the only 2 students we have from Mexico in our entire school. We have a very, very small Mexican population. They planted corn. I can't tell you how much it meant to families, to kiddos who'd just been released from detention, who'd been in cement, to walk out and get to see this teeny tiny box of corn growing. So I let the kids choose. We did some melons this year. We did squash, peppers, cucumbers. I take pictures of the plants that I see as I travel. I try to bring some back. This is a tropical plant on the bottom right. It did not thrive here, but that was a conversation in and of itself with kids, that, what you need to survive to figure out life here looks a little bit different than how you did things in Honduras. And so what adjustments are we going to make? Another aspect that makes it trauma sensitive is, and sensory, is a lot of my kids struggle with dissociating, with having traumatic memories, with flashbacks. And so I do a lot of work trying to ground them. And these are also, like, this graphic is part of it goes on the kids' lanyards that we talk about. Okay, we're going to 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch. This isn't new to therapists, I realize, but this is a way we actually integrate it here. So in the garden, we have chenille plant that they're touching. Actually, that's not, that's something spiky, but we have a chenille plant. We have a lamb's ear. We have touch that you can feel the thorns gently, of course. Listen to the birds in the bird bath. Smell the lavender, smell the jasmine. So using it as a grounding opportunity. We also have, like, cilantro they can taste. For the rabbit, we've started to grow some basil, cilantro, other things. Now, the kids do taste lots of things that maybe they're not supposed to, but nothing poisonous and dangerous. The butterfly aspect has been a wonderful metaphor for growth and transformation. You can find all sorts of insightful quotes about butterflies and going through tough times. It's been a wonderful way to teach empathy, to teach gentle touch. Over the year, as the year goes on, caterpillars take a walk before they turn into a chrysalis. And watching 14-year-old boys stop traffic on the sidewalk so the caterpillar can cross the road is powerful. We have to rescue our caterpillars because we have wasp attacks. And so we have our caterpillar wranglers who will help put them in nets. There's just an insane number of powerful mental health conversations you can have around any of these things. And it was a science teacher who first started bringing in milkweed to bring in butterflies. And so we started with 2 little milkweed plants, and it grew and grew and grew. The other story that, I'll share really, really quickly, the garden side started because of a kid from Central America. He would not go into the classroom. He was in crisis for something like, I want to say it was either 13 or 16 days, stood outside the room and screamed. We couldn't get him to enter. It was finally, we had the LSS, the school psychologist came in, everything we could imagine. No interventions were working. Nothing that I was trained in was working. Calm down bottles and bubbles and just nothing helped. And finally, the teacher said, what if you're the caterpillar manager? And this kiddo scooped up caterpillar poop and had a reason to get inside to make sure that that caterpillar was safe. And what we found out was he had been caring for his younger brother back home. And when he wasn't, he was terrified of how his brother was being fed when he wasn't there. This is a 9-year-old, mind you. But having another living thing that he could give back to gave him a reason to move forward. From the social emotional learning side, it's an opportunity to, socialization. These boys here had gotten to a fight, and so I put them to work. It's a great way to collaborate because some things are just too heavy to do. You need 2 sets of hands. Cooperation, it's hands-on experiential for different types of learners. It provides students a sense of agency, problem solving, responsibility. Plants have to be watered. Turning lemons into lemonade, our campus used to flood a lot. Well, it still does, but our garden used to flood. And so we floated boats and talked about that. We talk about what, plants and people need to stay safe, making rules for the garden. We can't step on plants, building on kids' strengths that they're already, a lot of my Central Americans have a background in agriculture. So it's a great opportunity to inspire that. The other aspect that I didn't expect, and from a personal side, was that both the garden and the rabbits have forced me to slow down. And I have benefited so much from, you can't rush plants growing, seeing leaves pop up out of plants that I thought we'd lost, and then having to slow down and take the time to water them, to work in the garden has really helped me as well. From the academic side, as as mental health practitioners, in the schools, we have to justify why this is important to do in a school and appropriate. There's so much that you can do with the garden, from the English language development with sensory imagery, science, growing patterns, sequential order. There's a couple really tiny examples that a teacher had made this year about how do we touch a butterfly? What tools and safety that she's aligning with the texts with teaks. One of my favorite days was having kids rush in to show me that they were giving caterpillars massages with paintbrushes. So the caterpillars would kind of wiggle, but this is a great way to teach gentle touch. From the administrative logistics side on my campus, I also fill the role of a school administrator. And so having to put some structure in place that kids can't be in the garden at all times, or they can stop by the garden, but you have to be attended. The kid on the left was a young man who was really struggling with substance abuse and anger. It was a chance to come in and weed instead of punching a wall. We could dig a hole and he could sober up when he was working out there instead of sending him home. There's something for everyone. It's a great behavior supported intervention. It does take a lot of adult supervision. I was out in the garden yesterday. It's messy, it's sweaty, it's hot. It takes some planning and it does take some money. I also really love that it's relevant across genders. And so I usually have a picture in here with a bunch of girls who like to garden. It was girls who decided that we should do melons. And so we worked to get them out this year. So I'm flying through things really quick so I can stop with plenty of time for questions. So I'm going to move on to talking about our rabbits. The rabbits were another accidental idea. I have a dog. Rabbits were not my goal, but I had a young man from El Salvador who decided he was done. He had been in therapy. It was not necessarily meeting all of his needs. He had decided he had been separated from mom from a really long time. In El Salvador, he was growing corn and raising cows, and he wanted to go back. He had no interest in coming to school. He just wanted to return to the lifestyle he had grown up in. And his caregiver that had raised him back in El Salvador had been suddenly killed in the United States. And so I had to call the crisis unit. I had been walking him to school every morning. And I finally asked him what would make school pleasant, what would be worth coming in for if I could start a small project. And he suggested a rabbit. And honestly, the idea was just an incentive to get him there. And I never expected what it would grow into. So we started out with Nieve. We have grown to Noche. This picture is special to me because I feel like I kind of put my life to, took a risk here. Nieve and Noche do not get along. They are enemies, and that is the closest they've ever gotten. But this has also led to wonderful conversations. You'll see in several pictures that they wear clothing. One of the kids, when we talk about finding your strengths, makes them clothes. Here they're wearing best friend t-shirts, which are ironic since they're not. Animal-assisted therapy is a real form of therapy. As a therapist with some training, I am able to do that. But animal-assisted interventions and animal-assisted activities don't take the same level of training. Animal-assisted interventions do, but animal-assisted activities can involve education, other life improvement activities. But again, these are evidence-based practices. So Nieve's been with us longer. We use her for everything from calming and grounding. So feel Bunny's heart rate, touch Bunny's nose, wiggle your nose like Bunny, feel her calm, her soft fur. This is when she was brand new, but feel her, she can sit in your arms as a companion. She is an opportunity for students to give back and protect her. You will notice in a lot of these pictures, it's all young men. I never expected the impact, the connection she would have with young boys. Rabbits are and this was for any animal. Rabbits have been a good fit with us because they're across cultures. So Guatemalans are familiar with them, Burundians are familiar with them, Iraqis, Afghan students, Hondurans, everybody, they also frequently eat rabbits. So we have conversations about how we don't eat nieve or noche. But the fact that everybody's familiar with a rabbit has been really helpful. And they don't make much noise, so helps as well. For kids that have severed relationships, that have trouble with attachment, the rabbits have been phenomenal to start relationship building. They are accepting, or animals in general with animal assisted work, it's accepting, it's a non-judgmental of the person they're interacting with. It's a fresh start. They teach about natural consequences. So if you come in and yell at Bunny, then the bunny's gonna be scared. If you poke your fingers in the bunny's mouth, the bunny will nibble your fingers. The bunny has to defend itself. And so it's a really great way to start some very concrete conversations, building trust, getting to know new people, and there's this reciprocal relationship based on the animal's response to the child. In the picture on the right, the kids really took to heart that the rabbits didn't get along, and so they suggested that maybe this is one of our practice Nieves needed to acquaint herself with Noche, and so they're head to head in this picture. On the left, I have two of the most difficult children I've worked with working together and teaching how to help Bunny calm down by stroking her nose to her forehead. There have been incredible opportunities for some really meaningful conversations about being separated from family. In the case of a lot of our kids, about what it's like to live in a cage for our youth who are detained at the border and kept, about tolerance. The other thing I wanted to know at this point was that I have a second job in the evening where I'm working with older youth who are involved in the juvenile justice system. And they have really taken to the rabbits as well. It's been a great conversation around gang territory. When Noche joined the family, talking about, I had one student who told me really firmly that, of course it's a problem. You can't just have somebody new on your block, and it's a process. It's about body language and whether you're welcome or not. And you can't just walk on somebody else's space. Skin color, it's a lot easier for some of our kids to talk about racism, and when the two rabbits are both sweet and cuddly, but they're different colors, fur colors. For some kids, the rabbits are their closest friends. It's an opportunity for them to socialize and connect. This is a kiddo who was making the whole rabbit wardrobe, and then empathy and safe, tough conversations. This is the very first day we had Nieve on the right, and I will never forget the kids who leaned in to give her a kiss, and I dodged, not realizing that they were trying to keep her safe. They were very worried about how frightened she would be away from her mom for the first time, because they could reflect on their journey and being away from their parents. From the academic side, there's writing, describing, creating stories, reading to bunnies. When you come in, if you have a problem, why don't you practice telling your problem to Nieve before Miss Sarah can sit down and talk to you. We are talking about caring for animals, nutrition, health, habitats, animals across cultures, all sorts of math lessons as well, hygiene, taking care of your body when I get to take them to the vet. We document everything. From the logistics side, we're also talking about consent. We have to ask permission if you can touch Nieve, and because Nieve cannot speak for herself, we also have to ask Miss Sarah if you're allowed to touch Nieve. It does require supervision. For some of my kids, it's a lesson in gentleness. Not everybody's ready for real Nieve, and so we have practice rabbits. They're also phenomenal transitional objects. This last week, I gave a kiddo a practice Nieve, and they had scribbled all over her. And so now we're talking about how you're supposed to treat. We would never draw on a bunny. We don't tattoo bunnies. Again, they're relatable across cultures. We talk about care. I have some great rabbit managers each year. It's a concrete example of safety and rules. We don't curse around the bunny. We have to use English around the bunny, and on and on. We did take some training, this is the assistant principal in the bottom right, to learn about animal-assisted work. The last few minutes, I want to talk a little bit about restorative practices on our campus. And I think many people are familiar with restorative work, but trying to think about how you do it with non-English speakers, especially when I can do the restorative work in Spanish, but when you have Pashto and Kinyarwanda in Spanish in the same room, or Pocomam, Quiche, Cachiquel all together, we have to find other ways to do really, really basic English. And for kids who are unaccustomed to schooling, we have to find ways to break it down. But it's so important from a trauma side because we're focusing on why, we're moving away from why and we're shifting to what happened. But most importantly, from the mental health aspect, it's an opportunity to start talking about how we can begin to repair the harm that was done in big incident, whether a pencil was thrown or a really big frightening thing happened, because we're looking at kiddos who've never had a voice, who've gotten to address and repair their harm before. On our campus, this is the model that we're moving towards. I am not gonna tell you that this is working perfectly right now. The idea is we do proactive circles that are supposed to be laying the groundwork and forming a strong community so that when there is a problem, when we have to have reactive circles, repair the harm circles, then we've already got that really strong familiar with the process and sense of community. I try to describe restorative work like an ice cream cone because the affective statements and the affective questions fill up that cone so it's not hollow when you're doing circles. When we're trying to adapt for newcomers, you have to know your students and read the situation. I prefer the assistant principal and I like to do circles together. I think it's a better balance because it's not a circle if you just have one kid. So that's usually if you will, the victim and the perpetrator, or both parties. And I think having more than one adult is really useful. We are working hard to create a family community feel. So we have to create a safe space beforehand. We do a lot of role playing, and especially having like a good co-therapist, a good co-facilitator for circles, we're acting things out. So this is in my office where we are trying to act out with some really big, tough, mustached young men. We're trying to act out what had happened and how we resolve using, obviously, stuffed animals. It's really helped to have concrete questions when we start a circle. Usually we start with what your name is, where you're from, how long you've lived here, because often I will never forget working with a Honduran young man and a Syrian young man, and both thought that they were the right one to be here and the other one shouldn't be. They were completely in the wrong. And hearing that the Honduran had been here for 3 months, a Syrian young man had been here for 4 months, both of them felt frightened, uncomfortable, didn't speak the language. Just in that brief introduction really, really helps. And then starting out with, I think there's a problem. Do you think there's a problem? Yes or no. So, you're setting someone up for success by having a concrete question that they can answer and move on. We are working on having campus-wide language that is, I have a problem, I need help, and we need to repair the harm. Ooh. I'm sorry if things just popped up on my screen. I'm getting reminders. Let's see, about one or two more things to share, and then I'm ready for take some questions. As an English language learning campus, we believe total physical response when we teach is really important, visual cues. So we start circles with circle up, where we act things out. You can see our pictures there. We're including mindfulness, and then your typical components with a talking piece, circle questions, and a brave statement. This is so important to me because looking at kids who experience trauma, knowing that trauma is an event that's beyond your control, restorative practices give an individual an opportunity to start to regain control and have some power to heal. This is the first time so many of my kids, especially my Guatemalan kids or my Garifuna kids from Honduras, they've come from a very disenfranchised community, and this is the first chance they've gotten to use their voice. And by having safe co-facilitators, we're able to start that conversation. We're modeling a new way to operate. And from the evening side, I try to bring in that in Harris County, this is the shift. This is the way that Houston, the juvenile justice system here is moving. And so this is not just a Las Americas idea. This is not just a Houston ISD idea. This is the community. This is, we believe in repairing the harm. We're teaching to repair and restore, and we're building empathy by identifying the impact of our actions on others. In our cell class that we talked about earlier, we're integrating, so we do circles in our cell class. This is the first day of school circle. Last year with Nieve getting to visit, we're using I statements, talking about how to give and receive an apology, teaching class concepts in circles as well. And what I really, really hope people take away is that this stuff is hard and messy. And I get self-conscious about presenting and talking about it because I don't want to by any means give the impression that I'm doing it perfectly. It's so hard. It's all taken a big, for instance, the rabbits come home with me on the weekend. It's a lot of logistical planning. There's rabbit poop all over the place. I mean, in a clean way, but it takes work that I didn't have rabbits before, and all of a sudden there's rabbits in the office. We have to clean up around them. My mother has stepped in and helped out a whole lot and been introduced at the school as the rabbit's grandmother, the abuelita de Nieve. Noche. These are big risks, and they've worked on our campus, but every day looks a little bit different. There's something for everyone, but it takes creativity, and it doesn't have to be a giant intervention every single time. Well, yesterday, I have a brand new kid from El Salvador who is really having trouble adjusting, never been in school before, and has been crawling on the floor and barking. And the teachers are going crazy trying to manage this barking child in their class. And so he often ends up in my office. And yesterday in a sudden idea, decided to teach him that, well, the rabbits are afraid of dogs, so we can't bark around the rabbits. But if you really like animals, what if when you have a problem, you try to resolve your problem as a rabbit, not as a dog? And so we talked about how rabbits investigate things by smelling them and wiggling their nose. So when he's concerned, instead of barking, let's wiggle our nose and investigate. So it's not a permanent intervention. It's in the moment, something else we can try, but it's creative, it's fluid. He's also hopping as of the end of the day yesterday, but he's no longer barking, and it's just day by day. And so it's whatever's relatable and we can try. The last thing I wanted to mention, especially about the rabbit, was this has been a great opportunity to connect with students. Nieve and Noche travel as I travel, and so these are all cutouts of them. So Nieve looks the same in every picture, but Nieve, the kids get to follow Nieve's adventures on Instagram and see Nieve was in San Pedro Sula. This is in Chichicastenango in El Salvador, and then in New York, and with assistant principal and I. So it's been a wonderful tool to connect. And it takes the focus away from Ms. Sarah, but what is Nieve up to? So it's also an opportunity that we get to follow along and stay in touch. I am happy to take any questions people have. And yeah, back over to you, Carlos.
Okay, Sarah, we really want to thank you for a wonderful, wonderful presentation. And before we get to the questions and answers section, I would like to remind you all that at the end of this presentation, you will be receiving a link for completing a survey. This survey is of utmost importance in order for us to continue delivering educational webinar like this. So please, please complete this short survey. That'll take you about only 2 minutes, and then you will be supporting our work. So let us go into some of the questions that the audience shared here. Some people are just thanking you. Thank you for your commitment with the Latinx community. Working in a school setting, sometimes it's difficult for a teacher to follow up with skills teach in therapy. What your recommendations are: increase the teacher, therapists, and students follow up and communication. Okay, so let's go. We have a question here. Thank you for your commitment with the community. Oh, wait, give me just. Okay, what are your recommendations to increase teacher, therapist, and student follow-up on communication?
Oh man, I don't have an easy answer for that because I feel like I pull my hair out about it all the time. On the school side, we're constantly we've started behavior alerts this year, last year, to try and streamline communication. I kind of struggle with what's confidential and how much information the teachers need to know. For following up with communication, I think the biggest thing is being present, and I try to catch teachers whenever I can and just kind of give them an update. And I guess my biggest recommendation is the rabbits and the garden in particular have given a different view of the strengths of our students. And so giving teachers a chance to engage and see the amazing work that kids have done. Look at how sweet this kid who's being challenging in your class, look at them taking care of the rabbit. I think has helped give the teachers another perspective. Just straight communicating, it's just me running around like a chicken with my head cut off, trying to track them down and give some updates. But I don't know that I have a great answer. I'm sorry. We do lots of things like behavior charts and focusing on 1 or 2 goals. And I will say the rewards, the incentives I try to do with kids, I try to do time in. So you get to come work in the garden. It's not ever a punishment. It's always a reward. It's, sometimes there's some consequences to it at times, but it's supposed to be time in. I also tried last year, I had a bunch of Spanish speaking kids who wanted Maruchan as their reward, not Takis, but a cup of noodles. So I'm trying really, really hard to think outside the box and adapt to whatever motivates them. And then have the teachers get to celebrate some of their successes with them and reevaluating what a success looks like. But communicating wise, it's just hard. It's chasing them around.
Okay, great. Another question, how is the caregiver involved in the child's progress?
So a handful of different ways. On our campus, we've been really fortunate up until this point to have a handful of therapists through DePelchin, an organization in Houston. And when we have individual clients that need more individual attention on a regular schedule than I can give, then I refer them to the DePelchin staff, and they communicate regularly with parents, with guardians. For me, honestly, I got myself a work phone and I use WhatsApp with them, and I follow up with parents and we have boundaries on communication, but nobody's ever abused it. And so I try to involve them with showing kids successes, sending a picture of what their kid's doing, assuming that there's a media release and they're okay with their kids being taken. Inviting them in this year. When I was in Guatemala this last summer, actually traveling all around, I started brainstorming more ways to get parents in the school because our parents are living in crisis. And so if I can empower our parents, our caregivers, so that they feel calmer and more confident, I'm trying to start like a Guatemalan parents club where we're actually going to try and make some handicrafts and get to relate with one another. I work really, really hard to keep our parents on a good, positive engagement so that they don't feel burned and frustrated. I try from a discipline side to reach out only in case of an emergency so that we don't ever burn them out with little frustrating behaviors, because I'm also understanding when you look at the hours, especially for our kids who've been separated from, say, mom for 10 years or 12 years, we have more awake contact hours with kids than they do if you're looking at a 40-hour week. And we're the trained professionals. And so I want to inform our parents and tell them about, anytime we talk, we're going to talk about the strengths of their kid as well. But trying to find other ways to engage with them and celebrate the parent and the culture and really validate how hard it must be to be raising a 12-year-old that you don't know very well.
Okay, so another question, where to start if we want to create a program like this in a school? Does it work with private fundings or sponsors?
So I talk a lot. I've been really fortunate to have the opportunity to give some different presentations, and people have reached out to me about funding initially the social emotional lessons. And that was my first taste into grant writing. So I have some grants. I have one big grant that funds things. As I talk about the kids I work with, we've had other opportunities of offers to help with the garden, to help with this, to help with that. I will say any opportunity with the approval of your school to speak publicly about the work that you're doing really gains support. And so I did an interview last summer with the local newspaper, and it really grabbed people's attention and has led to additional support. So it's saying yes to stuff and finding professional ways to talk about the work that you're doing. I think the school's also able to match some things on occasion, like, okay, well, you've done this and this and this, we'll help you out with this side. You found so much funding for the private side. But honestly, it's more expensive in time than anything else, because there's definitely ways you can cut corners, like rabbits don't cost much, but it's the time of taking care of them.
Okay, thank you, Sarah. And then one last question. How do you overcome the real life stressors that your students face when they are not at school, at home, in the neighborhood, etc.?
It's so hard. It's so hard. My goal, it's changed over the years, and my goals for new arrivals look very different, I imagine, for those who work with than those who work with other populations. My goal is to keep my kids alive and feel safe enough to come back the next day. They're not necessarily going to win their court cases, but I need to give them the strength to show up to court, to follow the process as long as possible. So I'm trying to teach them coping skills. I'm trying to teach them ways to handle their sadness, their anger, their frustration. Whether it's, I carry all sorts of the concrete side, tangible side, I carry fidget items in my purse. So you're going to go to court tomorrow, let me whip out a can of Play-Doh that you can fidget with. My Guatemalan kids use cough drops like candy. So I carry balls that, in Guatemala, they're dulces. So I try to teach how to calm down in the moment, so that hopefully when other big scary things happen, you know how to calm down. And then my other side is teaching about helpers, and that I'm a random white woman who speaks heavily accented Spanish, but I'm trying to teach that I'm somebody that they can trust, and so look for other people they can trust. And we talk a lot about trusting people, because I'm not going to be able to resolve everything in the year that my kids are with me. But giving them a skill set and reminding them of how brave and strong they are, so that they can reflect on that when there's a problem in the future, is the best I can do.
All right, Sarah. We appreciate a lot your presentation. It has been wonderful. And we just want to remind the audience about that short surveys that you might want to fill. It will be really helpful for our work. We will really appreciate it. And thank you all for attending. We'll see you on the next one. Have a good day.
Today's webinar. I would like to thank today's presenter and remind our audience that if you're interested in receiving further training on this topic, you may email us. Please look at our website to learn about future webinars and other services we can provide. As you leave today, you will be directed to complete a brief survey about your experience. Your feedback is very important to us, and we appreciate you taking the time to tell us what you thought of today's webinar.